The wind screamed through the alien forest, carrying sharp flakes of ice that stung like tiny knives. Jack pulled his hood tighter and pushed forward. His breath came out in clouds, fading quickly into the white emptiness. Every step sank into snow up to his knees, and his boots were already soaked through. The small sun was setting fast, and when darkness fell in this part of the galaxy, the temperature could drop low enough to freeze metal solid. He wasn't here for sightseeing. His mission was simple: collect mineral samples for the science station orbiting the planet and get out before the local predators decided he looked like dinner. The Krath Empire claimed this world, but no settlements lay nearby. It was the wild edge of their territory. Dangerous, unpatrolled, and very, very cold. Jack stopped suddenly. There, faint, almost swallowed by the wind, came a sound. Wasn't the usual groan of bending ice trees or the distant rumble of shifting snow. It was high-pitched, weak, a cry. He turned his head, listening. There it was again. It was coming from the cluster of frost-covered bushes ahead. Every survival instinct told him to ignore it. Sounds like that often meant a trap either from a predator luring prey or from bandits, desperate enough to ambush anyone foolish enough to investigate. But something in the sound hit him in the chest. It was the voice of something small, afraid. Cautiously, Jack moved closer. He parted the icy branches with his gloved hands. Inside, curled into a trembling ball, was a tiny creature. It was like nothing Jack had seen before, part feline, part reptile, with shimmering silver fur along its back and faint scales under its belly. Its large ears twitched at the sound of him, and its wide, bright eyes glared at him as if to warn him away. But the warning had no power. The creature's legs trembled. Its ribs were visible under the fur. Snow clung to its whiskers. The little one tried to stand, swaying on unsteady legs. It made a pitiful growl, a sound so thin it broke in the middle. Jack's hand went to his belt, where his blaster rested, but something stopped him. This wasn't a threat. This was a dying child. "You're not going to make it out here," Jack muttered, his voice muffled by the wind. Reached into his coat and pulled out his last ration bar. The packet was warm from being close to his body. He tore it open, and the smell of dense protein filled the air. The cub froze, nose twitching. Hunger was stronger than fear. It took a shaky step forward, then another, until it was right at Jack's boots. It gave him one last suspicious glare before biting into the food. Its small teeth tore into the ration like it hadn't eaten days, maybe longer. Jack stayed still, letting it eat. Every few seconds, the cub would glance up at him as if memorizing his face. There was an intelligence there, more than he expected from a wild animal. When it finished, it licked the wrapper clean, then looked back at him. The wind howled louder now, snow beginning to swirl around them. The temperature was dropping. Cub wouldn't survive the night alone. Jack's mind raced. He couldn't take it back to camp. The science station had strict rules about alien wildlife. If the Krath patrols found him with a native creature, they'd assume he was stealing it, or worse, and humans didn't get second chances in Krath territory. Still, he couldn't just walk away. He took off one of his outer thermal layers and gently wrapped it around the cub. It didn't fight him, just gave a tired sigh and sank into the warmth. Tucked it under his arm, feeling its tiny heartbeat against his chest. For the next hour, Jack pushed through the blizzard, the cub a silent weight in his arms. Snow blinded him, ice bit at his cheeks, and the cold seeped into his bones. Several times he thought he saw movement in the white haze tall, dark shapes keeping pace with him in the distance. Predators, maybe, or Krath scouts. Either way, stopping wasn't an option. At last, the dim outline of his shelter appeared, a temporary research hut, half buried in snow. He forced the door open and stumbled inside. Heat greeted him like a friend. "What?" He set the cub down near the small heater. It blinked at him, curling up instantly in the warm glow. Jack knelt beside it. "You'll make it now," he said softly. The cub didn't answer, of course, but it looked at him with eyes that seemed far older than its small body. Something passed between them, an unspoken promise neither fully understood. That night, while the blizzard roared outside, Jack sat awake by the heater, watching the little creature sleep. In the morning, he would have to let it go. He had no choice. But as he looked at it, peaceful for the first time since he'd found it, he felt a strange pull in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this small act of kindness, in the middle of a frozen wasteland, would echo across decades. The cub would remember. And one day, the galaxy would remember too. Outside, storm covered their tracks, erasing all signs of their meeting. But fate doesn't forget. And somewhere in the heart of that tiny creature, a seed had been planted, a seed that would grow into something powerful, dangerous, and utterly unshakable. And Jack, he had just fed the future Empress of the Krath Empire. The years had not been gentle with Jack. His hair was streaked with gray now, his shoulders broader but heavier with the weight of time. The reckless young explorer who once trekked through alien snowstorms was long gone. Now he was a cargo pilot. For hire. Moving shipments between human colonies scattered on the edge of Krath space. It was an easy enough job. Keep your head down, make the deliveries, avoid the attention of the powerful. Jack liked it that way, but peace never lasts. He was sitting in a dim spaceport bar on Telver Station, nursing a drink that tasted faintly of engine oil, when the room around him fell into a strange hush. Conversations died mid-sentence. Turned toward the wall-mounted holoscreen above the counter. Jack followed their gaze. A news broadcast was playing. Though news was too mild a word, it was more like an announcement from a throne. A towering alien woman appeared in the projection, standing before a great golden emblem shaped like jagged wings. Her armor gleamed black and gold, and her eyes sharp, bright, almost predatory, seemed to pierce straight through the lens. The new ruler of the Krath Empire. The announcer's voice said, "Empress Wrath has united the high clans under her banner. Her rise is unprecedented. In less than 3 years, she defeated all rivals, conquered disputed territories, and most shocking opened diplomatic channels with species once considered enemies." Jack leaned forward without meaning to. Something about her face stirred a flicker of memory, though it didn't make sense. The Kraths were infamous for their hatred of humans. Yet the Empress's expression wasn't the cold sneer he'd seen from other Krath leaders. The screen changed to show images of her in battle, charging through enemy lines, lifting wounded soldiers with ease, standing at the center of a massive crowd of warriors, chanting her name. Around the bar, people began to talk again, in low, almost fearful tones. "She's not like the others," a trader muttered at the next table. "Not like them? She's worse." "I heard she's unstoppable in a fight," another replied. "Unstoppable, yes, but strange," a third voice cut in. "I heard from a Krath merchant that she spares humans sometimes. Don't kill them, even when it's expected." "She'll do that?" Jack's fingers tightened around his glass. His mind went back to a freezing night on a nameless planet, to a half-dead cub with silver fur and bright, intelligent eyes. No, it couldn't be. The Krath Empress couldn't possibly be, but the thought refused to leave him. Over the next few weeks, the whispers followed him from station to station. Every port had its own version of the story. Some claimed she was part of an ancient prophecy. Others swore she had been abandoned as a child and survived against impossible odds. Jack listened, silent, as the puzzle pieces began to fit together, in ways that made his stomach tighten. One night, on the cargo run to Branther 9, he found himself in another seedy bar, this one lit by flickering green lamps and filled with the heavy scent of alien spices. A group of mercenaries at the far table spoke in hushed excitement. "I was there," one of them said. "On Threx Prime, a human thief was caught in her palace. Everyone thought she'd have him executed on the spot, but she didn't. She spoke to him in private, then let him go." "Lies," another snorted. "No Krath ruler would let a human thief walk." "I swear on my life it happened," the first insisted. "And the strangest part? She gave him a satchel of food before he left." Jack's drink went cold in his hand. Food. The memory of tearing open a ration pack in a snowstorm hit him like a punch. The small, trembling creature looking up at him. The way it had watched him, memorizing his face. Jack didn't believe in fate. Not really. But the galaxy had a way of bringing old debts to the surface. That night, back on his ship, he pulled up every public record he could find on Empress Yath. Most of it was propaganda-long lists of victories, declarations of power, ceremonial speeches. But buried deep in the archives was a single, blurry image from over 20 years ago. It showed a young Krathrunt, barely the size of a human child, found wandering alone in the icy wilderness of a backwater planet. The photo was grainy, but Jack recognized those eyes. The realization hit him like a shockwave. The cub he had saved was now the most powerful ruler in the sector. Jack leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling of his cabin. He didn't know whether to laugh, feel proud, or start making plans to hide. If she remembered him, what would that mean? Gratitude, or something far more complicated. For now, all he could do was keep flying, keep delivering cargo, pretend the galaxy wasn't suddenly a much smaller place. But somewhere out there, on a golden throne, the cub he once wrapped in his jacket had grown into an Empress. If the rumors were true, she hadn't forgotten the human who fed her in the snow. Jack had no way of knowing that the next time they met, it would not be by chance, because she was already looking for him. The hum of the docking bay was steady and familiar, like the heartbeat of Jack's quiet life. His freighter Rustwind sat in berth 17, its hull patched with scars from decades of work. Jack had just signed off his latest delivery, a load of dehydrated grain to a mining colony, when the entire station seemed to shudder with a low, deep vibration. He looked up. Outside the viewport, something enormous drifted into position. It wasn't a trade vessel, or even a warship Jack recognized. This was different slick, black as deep space, its armor lined with glowing golden veins, the insignia painted on. Its bow was unmistakable. The jagged wing crest of the Krath. Empire's royal fleet. The station's chatter went silent. Dockworkers froze. Pilots backed away from their ships. No one wanted to be noticed by the Krath Royal Guard. Jack's gut tightened. This wasn't a patrol ship on routine business. Royal ships only appeared when the Empress herself had given an order. His suspicion turned to certainty when 3 figures in ceremonial armor stepped onto the docking bay floor. Their armor gleamed like molten gold, and their helmets were shaped like the heads of great predators. The leader carried a long obsidian spear tipped with a blade that hummed faintly. They didn't wander or ask questions. They came straight for him. Pilot Jack Varon. The leader's voice boomed through his helmet. It wasn't a question. Jack kept his voice steady. That's me. The warrior reached into a satchel and pulled out a sealed scroll, the kind used for royal decrees. A golden thread wrapped. It marked with the Empress's personal seal. The wax shimmered, as if alive. You are summoned, the warrior said, holding the scroll out. By order of Empress Urath, you will come to the Krath capital. Now, the words echoed in Jack's skull. People in the docking bay exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew a summons from the Krath Empress was no request. It was a command. And for a human, almost unheard of. Jack broke the seal. The message inside was written in formal Krath script, the kind he could only half read, but the meaning was clear. Come to my court. I will speak with you directly. No reason. No explanation. Just the weight of a ruler's will in every stroke. Of ink? Jack's first thought was that this could be a trap. The Krath had a long history of summoning enemies to their capital only to execute them as a public spectacle. But then another thought crept in, one that made his chest feel uncomfortably tight. Maybe she remembers. He tried to shake it off. Too many years had passed. The cub in the snow was a lifetime ago. But the image of her grown, armored, standing on a golden throne in the news broadcast wouldn't leave his mind. The leader of the Royal Guards took a step closer. You will board our ship within 10 minutes, he said. You're going to bring only what you can carry. Jack almost refused. But something in the warrior's tone told him refusal wasn't a real option. If he ran, they'd find him. If he fought, they'd kill him. So 10 minutes later, Jack stood in the cold shadow of the Krath warship's boarding ramp, a small travel bag slung over his shoulder. His crew watched from a distance, their faces pale. They didn't even say goodbye. It was as if they already thought he was dead. The warship's interior was as intimidating as its exterior, tall black walls lined with gold-lit patterns. It's like the inside of a cathedral built for warriors. The air was warm, carrying the faint metallic scent of Krath blood steel. Jack was escorted to a private chamber. No windows, just a single chair and a metal table. He waited there for what felt like hours, the hum of the engines the only sound. Finally, the door slid open. A new figure entered, taller than any Krath he'd seen before. Their armor decorated with silver talons at the shoulders, their helmet retracted with a hiss, revealing a pale, scar-marked face. Their eyes were amber and unblinking. "I am Captain Drevin," the figure said. "You are under the Empress's personal protection until we reach the capital." "Protection?" Jack asked, narrowing his eyes. "From what?" The captain's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "From those who would rather you never arrived?" Before Jack could ask more, Drevin turned and left, the door sealing shut behind them. The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. No one told Jack why the Empress wanted him. No one told him how she knew him. He tried to sleep, but every time his eyes closed, he saw the cub again, tiny, shivering, staring at him from the snow. When the warship finally dropped out of hyperspace, Jack's breath caught. The Krath capital world was a giant sphere of crimson clouds and black oceans. Vast golden cities floated above the surface on colossal platforms, linked by glowing bridges that stretched for miles. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying. The warship descended toward the largest platform, where a palace unlike anything Jack had imagined rose into the sky. Its spires were shaped like the claws of a massive beast, reaching toward the heavens. Golden banners the size of skyscrapers swayed in the wind, bearing the jagged wing crest. Jack's heart pounded as the warship landed. He wasn't sure if he was walking toward an audience or an execution. As the ramp lowered, the scent of incense and steel filled the air. And somewhere, deep in the palace, a woman in black and gold armor waited. She had spent 20 years building an empire. Now she wanted to see the man who had once saved her life, and this time there would be no snow to hide them. The palace doors were taller than a warship's hangar gate. Black metal, inlaid with lines of glowing gold, towered above Jack as the royal guards marched him forward. Every step he took echoed through the vast entry hall. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of strange incense and polished steel. Dozens of Krath warriors lined the walls, their armor polished to a mirror shine. Their eyes followed him, cold and unreadable. To them, a human walking into the heart of their empire was either a rare honor or a condemned fool. Jack kept his expression neutral. He had walked into dangerous places before, but never into the lair of an alien ruler whose power stretched across half the galaxy. The guards led him through a long corridor, past tall windows showing a dizzying view of the floating city outside. Massive banners, each embroidered with the jagged wing crest, hung from the ceiling. Sunlight filtered through crimson glass, staining the marble floor with streaks of red. Finally, they reached the audience chamber. The door swung open with a deep groan, and Jack stepped inside. The room was enormous, shaped like an arena, but silent as a tomb. Golden pillars rose to a ceiling so high it vanished into shadows. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat the throne. It wasn't just a seat, it was a monument. Forged from gold and obsidian, its sides carved with images of battles and victories. And on it sat the Empress. Jack froze. Even seated, she radiated a presence that filled the room. Her black and gold armor was sharper, more intricate than any he had seen. A long crimson cloak draped over her shoulders, flowing down the throne. Steps like a river of blood. Her hair, black as midnight, framed a face both beautiful and dangerous. Her eyes, bright, ambered gold, locked on him instantly. The guard stopped several paces back, leaving Jack alone in the center of the room. "Approach," she commanded. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a storm. Jack walked forward, his boots clicking against the polished floor. The hall was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. When he was close enough, she stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a predator rising from rest. She descended the throne's steps, step making the air feel heavier. Jack expected the cold formality of a ruler meeting an outsider. Instead, she stopped just a breath away from him. For a moment, she simply studied his face, her gaze tracing every line, every scar, as though confirming something she had carried in her memory for years. Then, to the shock of the entire court, she spoke softly. "You fed me once. When I had nothing." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The warriors exchanged confused looks, their hands tightening on their weapons. No one had expected the Empress to speak to a human like this. Jack's mind raced. He could barely breathe. "You," his voice caught. "You were a cub," she finished.
Probably a small week.
"Left to die in the snow. I remember the cold. I remember the hunger. And I remember the taste of the food you gave me. You wrapped me in your coat. You walked through the storm with me in your arms." The murmurs grew louder. Some of the Krath looked disgusted, others shocked. A few seemed almost respectful. "You saved my life," the Empress said. "Everything I am now, the throne, the armies, the victories exists because I lived that night." Jack didn't move. He could feel every eye in the room burning into him. "You've done well for yourself," he managed, his tone dry. For the first time, her lips curved into something close to a smile. It wasn't warm, it was sharp, like a blade, but there was truth in it. "I have ruled with strength," she said, "but I have never forgotten the one act of mercy that made it possible." She turned to face her court. "This human is under my personal protection. Any harm to him is harm to me, and to harm me," her gaze swept over the warriors like a knife, "is death." The tension in the hall was electric. Some warriors bowed their heads in obedience. Others stood stiff, their jaws clenched. Jack could tell there were many here who didn't like this at all. The Empress faced him again. "You will remain in my palace as my guest," she said. "There are things I wish to discuss with you, things that concern both your kind and mine." Hesitated. Staying here, surrounded by enemies, was dangerous. But refusing her in front of her court? That would be worse. "I'll stay," he said slowly. She inclined her head. "Good, you will dine at my table tonight. Captain will show you to your quarters." She stepped back, turning toward the throne. But just before she ascended the steps, she glanced over her shoulder at him. Her voice dropped low enough that only he could hear. "I never forgot your face, Jack Varon, and I never will." Jack stood frozen as the guards approached to escort him out. The murmurs of the court followed him, some curious, some hostile. He knew one thing for certain: this was no ordinary reunion. He had stepped into the center of galactic power, and the most dangerous ruler alive had just claimed him as her own. What he didn't know was that this act of protection would soon make him the target of everyone who wanted the Empress dead. The great dining hall of the Krath Palace was nothing like Jack had imagined. He had expected a warlord's feast, bloody meats, roaring warriors, the stench of victory and sweat. Instead, the hall was quiet, the air perfumed with herbs and burning oils. Golden light spilled from hundreds of hanging crystal lamps. Long tables stretched from one end of the hall to the other, lined with Krath nobles in armor polished to blinding perfection. Every gaze turned toward Jack the moment he stepped inside. He could feel their thoughts without hearing them. A human? Here? At the Empress's table? At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, the Empress sat. Her armor was gone. Instead, she wore a flowing black robe embroidered with gold patterns that shifted as she moved. At her side stood Captain Dreven, expression as hard as ever. The guards led Jack forward until he stood beside her table. The Empress rose, lifting a single clawed hand for silence. The whispers died instantly. "Many of you," she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall, "wonder why a human stands in this place. Why I, ruler of the Krath Empire, have called him here under my protection." Jack shifted. Slightly wishing every set of alien eyes in the room would stop staring through him, the Empress stepped forward, her gaze moving from face to face in the crowd. "Is because I owe him a debt no crown can ignore, and you will hear why." The hall was so silent Jack could hear the soft crackle of the oil lamps. 20 years ago, she said, I was nothing. Less than nothing, a runt. Cast out into the ice to die because I was too small to fight, too weak to lead. The storm swallowed me. My clan left me behind without a glance. Some of the nobles shifted uncomfortably. They were Krath's strength. Was everything. To admit weakness was a shame few could bear. I wandered the snow, she continued, numb, starving, ready to let the cold take me. Then I heard footsteps. Not of my people, but of another, a stranger, a human. The Empress turned slightly, her eyes locking with Jack's. He could have ignored me, walked away. I had nothing to give him. To his eyes, I was only an animal, half frozen, half starved. Yet he stopped, gave me food, warmth. He carried me through the storm when my legs could no longer move. A low murmur swept the tables. Some of the Krath looked skeptical. Others leaned forward, listening as though hearing a legend for the first time. This act, the Empress said firmly, was not weakness. It was the highest form of strength. Compassion when there was no reason to show it. Mercy to one who could not repay it. It is because of this man, she gestured toward Jack, that I stand here now as your ruler. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jack could feel the weight of her statement pressing on the room. It wasn't just a thank you, it was a claim. She was binding herself to him in front of her entire court, making it impossible for them to treat him as just another outsider. One of the nobles stood, a towering male with gold-plated horns. Empress, he said slowly, you speak of a debt. But is it wise to honor it now? We live in an age of war. Will your warriors accept fighting beside a human? The Empress's gaze sharpened. My warriors will accept what I command, she said coldly. If any doubt the value of this human, they may challenge my decision in the ring of judgment. The noble sat down quickly. No one volunteered for the ring when the Empress herself stood on one side. She turned back to the crowd. Understand this? Jack Varon is under my shield. His life is my life. Any harm to him will be answered with blood. The murmur that followed was darker this time, resentment brewing under forced obedience. Jack could see it in their eyes. Some accepted her words out of loyalty, others because they feared her, and a few because they wanted to test her promise. Empress seemed to sense it too, but she didn't care. She placed a hand lightly on Jack's shoulder, a gesture so small yet so public it was like a brand in front of them all. Sit, she said softly. Eat. The food was strange, but surprisingly. Good roasted spiced meat, thick bread made from crimson grain, and a sweet, sharp drink that warmed him from the inside. The Empress barely touched her plate. Her eyes scanned the room, watching every noble, every flicker of discontent. At one point, she leaned closer to Jack. They will test you, she murmured. Not all here value what you did for me. So, think I am blinded by gratitude. They may seek to prove it by making you fail, or making you bleed. Jack swallowed his mouthful. Sounds like a wonderful welcome. Her lips curved in a faint smile. Do not fear. I protect what is mine. It was meant as reassurance, but the way she said mine sent a shiver down his spine. By the end of the meal, the tension in the hall was like a storm waiting to break. The nobles bowed as the Empress stood, but their eyes stayed cold. She dismissed them with a wave of her hand as they left. Captain Drevin approached. The Empress will see you in the private war room. At dawn, he told Jack. Rest well. You will need your strength. Jack didn't know if that meant for diplomacy or survival. That night, lying in the lavish guest quarters, he stared at the carved ceiling. The Empress's speech had bound him to her in ways he hadn't agreed to. The entire empire now knew his name, and somewhere in the shadows of the palace, he was certain enemies were already deciding how to make him disappear. But one thing was certain, whatever came next. There was no going back to the quiet life he'd had before, because the Empress had just turned a moment of kindness in the snow into a debt that could change the fate of two species. The war room of the Krath Palace was a place built for decisions that shaped empires. It was circular, with a great black stone table at the center. Holographic stars floated above it, each glowing point marking a world under the Empress's. Ruler one she planned to take. Jack stood at the edge of the room, still not used to the feeling of being here. Around him, the walls were lined with tall windows showing the endless crimson clouds of the capital sky. The air smelled faintly of heated metal and the sharp temps of weapon oil. The Empress entered without announcement. She wore no crown, no. Flowing robonely, her black and gold battle armor, the kind a ruler wore when she wanted to be seen as a warrior first. Behind her came Captain Drevin, carrying a sealed case. "Sit," she said simply. Jack obeyed, though the chair felt like it might swallow him whole. "You have been in my palace for 2 days," the Empress began. "I have heard the whispers." Jack kept his face neutral. He'd heard them, 2 servants glancing his way and quickly looking away. Armored guards staring as if sizing him up for a coffin. "Some believe you have no place here," she said, her voice low but edged like a blade. "Others believe I protect you because of a soft heart." "And they're wrong?" Jack asked carefully. The faintest smirk touched her lips. "They are half wrong. I do protect you because of the past, but not out of softness. I protect you because you have value still." She motioned to Drevin. The captain stepped forward, placed the case on the table, and opened it. Inside lay a device unlike anything Jack had seen, a gauntlet of black steel, its surface etched with golden runes that glowed faintly. "This," the Empress said, "is the Crochan vow. It is given only to those I trust beyond question. When you wear it, my word becomes yours. My authority becomes yours. You will speak with my voice to any in my empire." Jack stared at it. The thing looked like a gift and a shackle all at once. "Why give this to me?" She leaned closer. "Because I am offering you a place at my side. Not as a soldier, not as a servant, but as my royal advisor. You will have power enough to shape the course of our dealings with humanity." Jack blinked. "That's a lot for someone who's been here less than a week." "I do not measure worth in time," she replied. "I measure it in action." "You acted once, in the snow, without thought for reward. That tells me more about you than years of service ever could." Jack glanced back at the gauntlet. "And what if I refuse?" The Empress's gaze sharpened. "Then you may leave. But you will leave as a man known to every rival I have. You will be hunted not by my command, but by those who see you as a weakness they can exploit. Here, I can shield you. Out there, you are alone." The choice hung heavy between them. Jack wasn't blind. This wasn't just gratitude. This was politics. The Empress was tying him to her, making his survival depend on her power. But deep down, he also felt something else, an echo of that night long ago, when she had been small enough to carry. Before he could answer, the chamber doors slid open, and a figure entered without permission. A tall Krath noble in deep crimson armor strode in, his movements sharp and deliberate. "Empress," the noble said, ignoring Jack completely. "This is madness. Granting a human the Crochan vow, you insult the bloodlines of the high clans." The Empress didn't even turn her head. "Lord Veth, you enter my war room without invitation. That is your first mistake." Veth's eyes narrowed. "My loyalty is to the strength of the Empire. Strength does not come from giving power to an outsider." Jack stayed silent, though his hand itched toward the edge of the table. The Empress rose to her full height. "Strength," she said coldly, "comes from honoring the debts that define us. This man saved my life. You question him, you question me?" Veth's jaw tightened, "and perhaps I will test him myself. In the ring of judgment." The words dropped like stones into the silence. The Empress stepped forward until she was inches from Veth. "You will not lay a finger on him unless I command it. And if you speak again in my war room without leave, you will not speak again at all." Veth's mouth opened, then shut. He bowed stiffly and left without another word. His eyes burned with the promise that this wasn't over. When the doors shut, the Empress looked back at Jack. "Do you see?" she said quietly. "The moment you stepped into my court, You became a threat to those who covet my throne. Without my protection, you will be torn apart. With it, you can change the game. Ash. Jack stared at the gauntlet for a long moment, then slid it onto his hand. The golden runes flared to life, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. I'll take the job, he said finally. The Empress's smile this time was real, still dangerous but softer at the edges. Then you are no longer just a guest. You are part of my court. And together, we will see who dares to challenge us. As Jack flexed his fingers inside the gauntlet, he had the strange feeling that he had just stepped into something far bigger than himself, something that began with a hungry cry in the snow and would end in the heart of an empire's storm. The capital was alive with sound. From the highest spires of the floating city to the lowest markets, drums thundered and horns blared. Banners of gold and black rippled in the wind, their jagged wing crests shining in the sunlight. It was the anniversary of the Empress's coronation, an annual display of power and loyalty. But this year was different. Jack stood at the edge of the grand platform, high above the crimson clouds. Thousands of Krath warriors filled the plaza below, their armor glinting like a sea of molten metal. Around them, citizens of every rank and clan gathered to watch. Even from this distance, Jack could feel the heat of their gaze. Captain Drevin stood beside him, his face unreadable. When she calls you forward, Drevin said, walk with your head high. They will hate you for it. Some will fear you, but all will know you. Jack adjusted the black and gold cloak the Empress had given him. The gauntlet of the Croatian vow still hummed softly on his hand, its golden runes warm against his skin. Horn blasts cut through the air, and the crowd erupted in a chant. The massive doors of the palace opened, and the Empress stepped out. She wore ceremonial armor brighter than the sun, each plate engraved with the battles she had won. Her cloak streamed behind her like a banner of fire. She did not walk to the center of the platform. She strode every step, sending a ripple of command through the crowd. When she reached the edge, she raised a hand. Silence fell so quickly, it was as if the city itself held its breath. 20 years ago, she began, her voice carrying over the plaza without the need for amplification. I was nothing. A cub abandoned in the snow. My clan left me to die, for they saw no worth in me. A ripple of discomfort ran through the warriors below. Admitting weakness was not the Krath way. But I lived, she continued, because a stranger chose to give instead of take. He was not of my kind. He owed me nothing, yet he gave me food, warmth, and the strength to walk again. Without him, I would not be standing here as your Empress. Murmurs spread like wind through grass. Some looked at one another in disbelief. Others stared up, waiting for her to name this mysterious savior. She turned then, her golden eyes locked on Jack. Come forward, Jack, Varen of Earth. Jack's pulse kicked hard in his chest. He stepped forward into the open, feeling the weight of thousands of stares. Da-da-da-da-da. He heard the words human and outsider hissed from somewhere below. The Empress reached out, her clawed, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. This is the one who saved me, she declared. This is the one to whom I owe my life. And today, I make that debt known to all. The plaza fell silent again. She turned back to the crowd. Is no longer an outsider. By my word, he is Krath in honor and standing. He will walk where I walk, speak where I speak, and fight where I fight. Any who raise a weapon against him, raise it against me. The reaction was instant and mixed. Some warriors slammed their fists to their chests in respect, their faces away in silent protest. But no one dared speak against her in this moment. The Empress reached to her belt and removed a small golden crest shaped like the jagged wing emblem. It was more than jewelry, it was the highest symbol of loyalty in the Empire. She pinned it to Jack's cloak, the metal warm from her touch. This, she said, her voice softer, but still carrying, is for the night in the snow. When the storm would have taken me, you did not walk away. Remember it as I do. For a moment, Jack could only look at her. The child he had carried through the blizzard was now a ruler feared across the stars. And yet, in her eyes, was still a trace of that small cub who had looked up at him with trust. The crowd roared not in celebration for Jack, but for their Empress. Still, in that roar, a shift had begun. The story had been spoken aloud. And stories had a way of living far longer than the moment they were told. As the ceremony ended, the Empress leaned closer to Jack. "You are part of my story now," she said, "and I am part of yours. There will be those who try to tear it apart. Let them try." Jack gave a small smile. "Sounds like trouble." Her lips curved in a dangerous grin, the best kind. The drums began again, shaking the platform. Beneath them, together, they turned toward the palace, walking side by side. From this day forward, every ally and enemy in the galaxy would know that the Empress of the Krath Empire had once been a helpless cub in the snow, saved by a human who never expected to see her again. And now, 20 years later, she had returned not just as a ruler, but as a friend, an ally, and a force that would change the balance of power forever. Some debts could be repaid with gold or land. Others could only be repaid with loyalty, trust, and the promise to stand together when the storms came again. Jack knew. This was one of those debts, and as the golden banners snapped in the wind above them, he realized the galaxy was about to learn exactly what that meant.